Apple may be trying to make up ground on AI technology.
Major clash between record companies and AI music services.
Two inescapable truths of our AI future.
AI.
Okay, we get it. AI is here. And it feels like every couple of weeks, some mind-blowing new AI tool is announced, and every single time, it feels impossibly more impressive than the last. And I think it's totally natural to have a knee-jerk repulsion to all things AI, right? I mean, it vaguely threatens the things we pride ourselves in that make us uniquely human. When an AI can make a compelling song in less than a minute, I'll be honest, there's a part of me that dies a little. The part of me that spent over 2 decades learning how to make a song. It's a bit like that feeling when you're the best at something in your tiny little friend group in high school. And then suddenly, you get exposed to a much bigger world after you graduate, and you realize you're not as great as you thought you were. It's kind of like that, but multiplied 1,000 times over. Because at least the Jacob Colliers of the world, who are annoyingly naturally gifted, are still human. They still have to put in the work to get to their level of skill. So when some soulless AI comes by and seemingly does what would take a human years or decades to do convincingly in just a few seconds, it makes you kind of want to just pack up and say, well, that's it, it's over for us. But I don't know, that feels a little short-sighted to me. And we're not talking about subjectivity here. I'm not here to argue whether or not AI is capable of creating great art in the first place. But objectively, the things that you can do with AI today are impressive feats of technology. I mean, seriously, go back to the 90s and show them what kind of stuff we can do with computers now.
Can you believe what's possible these days? Conversations through your computer? Worlds of information, one click away. All the things you find only on the world's most popular internet online service, now more affordable than ever? It's like living in the future.
So fast forward to today and really think about not only what's already possible, but what's plausible with the technology we have right now. It's impressive, crazy, and honestly a bit scary all at once. But as the great Kevin Parker once said, AI will irreversibly be a major part of our lives from here on out. That part is undeniable. For me, that major part is music and audio production. It's how I make my living, it's what I know best, and to be honest, it's probably one of the first industries that will feel a major shift due to AI. And so I figured I'd make a video as an excuse for me to face the future and figure out what it all means for me. And hopefully, in the process, you take away something from it too. Let's open up Pandora's box and see what's inside.
You are watching Sound Learn.
I figured I should start this video by addressing the biggest elephant in any room when the word AI is even uttered.
AI bad.
Yes, AI bad, but AI also good? Maybe? Obviously, the idea of AI unethically learning from and essentially duplicating other people's work on any level is not okay. That being said, I've heard plenty of arguments for and against machine learning using existing artwork without the original artist's consent. Take this for example. If I grew up playing Hendrix guitar licks and slowly mutated them into my own sound by blending it with my other inspirations, am I stealing? Do I owe my inspirations royalties for everything I create? And that makes sense to me. Like, ask any musician who their inspirations are, and pretty much every single time you'll be like, oh yeah, I can totally hear that in your music. Most of us learn by emulating the things we love. On the other hand, you have really solid arguments against. AI generative music is literally just a lifeless corporate entity slowly vacuuming the souls and art from artists who specifically chose art over a more traditionally viable career, and then regurgitating lesser versions of their art, stealing the limited potential work they do have in the process. I didn't actually read those arguments anywhere. I actually just made them up. But my point is, I can see both sides, and I think the reality is somewhere in the middle. Are we off to a bad start? Yeah, undoubtedly. The nerds over at Silicon Valley should have maybe pumped the brakes on training AI with literally every piece of media in existence before figuring out the legal and ethical part of doing that. But to my earlier point, AI on a technical level is impressive, and the potential uses are truly mind-blowing if you allow yourself to go down that rabbit hole sans the whole ethical aspect of it. It's honestly why I think, regardless of the general backlash from the public in regards to AI, people keep curiously poking their heads around every time some sort of progress is made. We want to see what it can do. It's the morbid curiosity a drummer may have had when the first drum machines came out in the early 1930s to see what they were really capable of, to see how much of a threat it would be to them. Almost a full century later, and drummers are still drummers, and the drum machine never replaced anyone. They just kind of became their own thing. They coexist. And I think we're in the same phase now with AI. We're trying to poke holes into it from every angle because we feel threatened by the fact that it feels like it's attempting to slowly replace us, even if it's not doing as good of a job as we're capable of currently. The optimist in me thinks AI will have its hysteria die down and will become a bit more boring. In a good way, in a, oh hey, I guess we can coexist kind of way. But ultimately, it would be very naive to ignore the alternative possibility of AI becoming a net negative for humanity in the long run. There's also the very real possibility of future generations feeling no need or desire to explore creativity once AI becomes the norm. Truly great art is usually a result of years and years of struggle and trial and error and life getting in the way. It's someone's lived experience being shared with the world through a creative medium. But if we can create art with a prompt in a few seconds, what incentive will future generations have to start at the ground level? Why bother struggling through the physical pain of learning to play your first chords on guitar? Everyone sucks when they start making art. It's not fun, it's not cool. It's the reason over 90% of people quit playing guitar within the first 3 months of starting. And it makes you wonder, is that number going to jump up to 99% or even 100% because of AI? I don't know, I'd like to think not. I'd like to think that it might just do the opposite. Maybe there's going to be tools that give everyone the ability to have their very own personal guitar instructor that caters to every individual learning style for higher rates of success. Regardless, it's easy to see why the future feels so bleak when it comes to AI. It threatens a fundamental shift in society for the better or worse. It's all totally up in the air right now. But for the sake of my sanity, I choose to approach it in a cautiously optimistic way. I don't think I'd be able to handle wrestling with the doom and gloom of the possibility of everything going south each time I think about AI. Maybe I'm in denial. I really don't know at this point. I fully acknowledge that I'm glazing over the very questionable part of AI in general, but like I said, it's kind of not really our choice on whether or not it should be a thing anymore. That ship has unfortunately long sailed. Just know that, like, I get it. Cool? All right. Moving on, okay.
You know John Lennon. Lennon said, I'm an artist. You give me a tuber, I'll get you something out of it. For instance, I look at you and I think, what could I use you for?
Music is going to change because of AI, and some of those changes are not the obvious things you may be expecting. For example, if you're a bedroom producer who's great at writing and producing music, but maybe not so good at mixing it, there's a very real possibility AI will dramatically assist you in mixing a song and potentially just even mix it entirely for you. Will it be perfect? No. Well, maybe, but probably not. But will it probably be better than what you may have been capable of without years of professional experience behind you? Yeah, it's pretty likely. And as I'm saying it, it feels a little dirty. Like, I feel like I should immediately feel guilty for suggesting taking away a potential job from a mixing engineer. I mean, I'm shooting myself in the foot here, but the reality, I think, is a lot more boring. Most bedroom producers simply don't have and will never have the budget to get their records mixed professionally. Very few artists are fortunate enough to be making beyond ends meet with their music these days. It can be extremely daunting to justify spending hundreds of dollars per song for something that may take literal years to just break even with. So the question becomes a bit more existential. Do artists who were never able to afford a mixing engineer in the first place not get the luxury of hearing their song in the best possible form, even if the means to do so are available through AI? I mean, at its core, Isn't all we're doing as songwriters and producers just attempting our best efforts to get what we hear in our heads onto a tangible format so that other people can hear it the way that we hear it? Like, if I could Bluetooth my song directly from my brain into an MP3 and you could hear exactly what I'm hearing in my head when I have an idea, why would I not do that? Okay, so that may be a bit extreme, but there's something to it, right? Like, yeah, a good record is made up of good performances. It's what gives the music soul. But not everyone is gonna have the resources to realize their vision and the songs they hear in their heads. Really think about all of the things that get in the way of getting your ideas out. First, you need to learn how to play music. It takes years. Then you need to learn how to write songs, which also can take years. Find a way to record those songs. You need to learn how to mix, or again, find some forms of media you can release. It's a lot. And look, I'm not saying every single part of that should be automated and replaced by AI. I personally enjoy every bit of that process. I love having control over every tiny little aspect of a song, but not everyone does. And it's a shame that there's an implied notion that you don't deserve to make and share your music if you're not willing to be obsessed with the process. It bums me out that the world will never get to hear some truly great music because it's being gatekept by the fact that it requires a lot more than just make a great song. I can't tell you how frustrated I was when I first got into recording. I'd play all the guitar parts I had written correctly, and the performance was great by my 17-year-old standards of great, at least, but I'd listen back and think, well, that doesn't sound very good at all. And it wasn't just the mediocre musicianship. The recordings just sounded bad because I had no idea what I was doing. I couldn't understand why simply writing and recording the guitar parts didn't translate to what I was hearing in my head. And that frustration was almost enough to get me to quit music entirely, but because of who I am, I decided the only way to not quit music was to go all in. There was no middle ground for me. It took me taking huge risks in life to get to a place where I felt fluent in music production and audio engineering, and I was fortunate. I found work. I got to keep developing my skills, and I made it. Not everyone has that luck, even if they have the natural skills for it. Like, what if you were a natural songwriting prodigy, but you just grew up too poor to ever own an instrument in the first place? Is all that risk and sacrifice really required just to be able to make music? Life is hard. Not everyone has the opportunity to just go for it. The rise of YouTube made it possible for kids to learn how to produce great music for free. Why can't AI be that same bridge for aspiring artists who just haven't been as fortunate? The world of music and audio is about to drastically change, and the tools we use will blur the line of what's considered skill and what just becomes considered tedious and better off relegated to AI. Like, can you imagine if we had never moved on to automating the process of making paper because we'd be taking the artistry away from the craft? How many writers and artists throughout history have automation to thank for their artwork existing? On the other hand, the automation of paper probably felt like the end times for paper makers. Like, there were probably dudes for a couple of generations whose entire thing was making paper, and then suddenly automation happened. We could build machines that made the paper making process so mundane that we literally made a sitcom about how boring paper is.
What about you, Kevin? What about you and your fake task? Can you tell me now where paper comes from?
The man tree puts its penis.
And still, centuries later, there is someone out there making a living selling handmade paper. The craft never went away. In a practical sense, there should be absolutely no reason for handmade paper to still be a thing, but the reason why it's still a thing is obvious to me. It's unique. There's perfection in the imperfections of making paper by hand. You can tell there was a person on the other side of the creation of that single piece of paper. It's that slightly out of tune guitar and bad piano chord on the intro of Roxanne. And I guess that's the thing. Imperfection tells a story. And if there's something we love as a species, it's a good story. Context is everything. It's the thing that makes a loud crash in the middle of the night a minor annoyance because you can safely assume your cat has zoomies, versus it being a very terrifying sound because you don't own a cat and someone or something is in your house. We love context and we love narrative. It's why Taylor Swift's music isn't just fairly safe guitar-driven pop music to Swifties, it's an entire cinematic universe intertwined with her personal life and the story behind her career. There's layers. The fact that I even feel a little bit scared of pissing off Swifties with that last sentence is driven entirely by context. If we simply judged music for the sounds that occur between the moment you hit play and when the song ends, we would be doomed, because AI is going to be able to create music indiscernible from music created by humans really soon. But luckily for us, that's not the case. We love to watch artists grow over the years, watching them play to a few dozen people in a tiny venue one year.
This is my first show ever.
And then headlining Coachella 5 years later. Context is the reason AI will never fully replace musicianship. People want to fall in love with the human behind the lyrics of a song more than they want to fall in love with the actual song. I think AI is going to have this massive side effect of bringing back live music in a way that we haven't seen in decades. The same way music streaming ironically brought back vinyl. We have every song in the world at our fingertips. Why in the world is anyone still buying vinyl? Well, if you've ever held a record in your hand, you probably know why. It's tangible. It bridges the gap between you and the artist. You can almost see the dynamics of the song and the grooves of the record. It's got artwork, lyrics, and sometimes even a long-winded rant straight from the artist. It goes from just being some text and an album cover on your computer to something you can hold and cherish and keep for years and pass it on to your relatives. We almost lost physical media until the thing that was supposed to kill it ironically saved it by reminding us that it's more than just music. I think AI is going to do that for music. Don't get me wrong, we're definitely going to see AI being abused in the same way auto-tune was when it first came out. It'll probably get worse before it gets better. But I'd like to think we're about to enter an era where pop won't reign supreme for the first time in a long time, and I think that's really exciting. A phase where people will actively seek music that takes more effort to understand and enjoy, because when just about anyone will be able to generate a top 40 hit in a few seconds, it's gonna get old really fast. The fact is, we have a huge advantage over AI as humans. By the very nature of how AI works, we can always be one step ahead. AI, at least in the foreseeable future, has no incentive to be contrarian. It doesn't understand the concept of oversaturation. So it'll never get bored enough of something to innovate and create something truly new. It can only do what it's learned to do or what it's being told to do. And of course, each time we innovate, AI will then learn and replicate that new thing we've just done and probably do that just as good or better than we can. But that's a good thing, because it means the cycle of music is going to evolve quicker and quicker. Something like dubstep as a genre won't take years to develop and peak. It'll happen in a few months or maybe even a few weeks. AI is going to push us to the edges of our creativity much more than we can push ourselves, because AI is relentless. And I find that to be extremely exciting. But even beyond the public consciousness of who's on the cutting edge of the music industry, I think we're gonna see a lot of really great art happen on a smaller scale because of AI. Music won't be limited to just musicians that have been doing it for years. They'll still have their space, obviously, but everyone's gonna have a shot at creating great music. People who have a story to tell, people who maybe didn't have the opportunities to dedicate their entire lives to music, people who just want to create a custom soundtrack for their kids while they read them bedtime stories, people who want to express their love to their partner but have never picked up a guitar in their lives. And I think it's important to remember that music doesn't have to be a product or a sport. It can be this thing that you just create for the sake of creating. There's obviously something really enjoyable and stimulating about watching jazz, for example, in a live setting where music is just being created in the heat of the moment by a handful of musicians that are at the absolute top of their game and have decades and decades of practice behind them. But you're also allowed to lose your mind dancing to a super repetitive, obnoxiously catchy song on the radio that was made using a few splice samples. There's really no point in pinning one form of art against another form of art, regardless of what went into the creation. In the end, if it makes you feel good and it makes you feel something, who cares? So it's just not black and white. Obviously, AI is going to affect the music industry on some level, and how people get paid, that's a part that we all have to figure out together. But the way I see it is, if AI can help truly democratize music, then maybe there's a way we can coexist with it. Either way, it's happening, so strap in, I guess.